The gi exists because it's fun to cosplay as a late 19th century Japanese bathhouse attendant. Plus, and I don't know if I should say this, but you can negate it. There's my George Dillman impression. No. Plus, it's fun to cosplay while participating in a mock feudal system of hierarchical ranks and fantasizing that you are the protagonist of a 1980s karate movie. Reason number 2. The gi also exists because Sensei Greg is really good at the bow and arrow choke, and how else is he going to choke you out if you're not wearing a gi? And number 3. The gi also exists because, statistically speaking, people are 100% more likely to join a cult if they've got matching white uniforms. Hi, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. I posted these amazing facts on the internet about a week ago, and I got some fascinating replies. It's clearly humor, but not everybody saw it that way, because apparently humor is now dying out quicker than the dinosaurs did. Rip dinosaurs. Let's read some of the angry comments. I think most people got the joke. People who actually get out there and train. But I have a few people, including black belts, Jiu-Jitsu black belts, who apparently are immune to a sense of humor. Their defense against jokes is just so high that they can't get it. People started insulting me, insulting my religion. This happens so often. People will bring up my religion out of nowhere. You don't like the gi? Well, your religion sucks. Why did they do that? This happens like every day that I look at the internet. Every single day of my life. At least once. At least once. No matter what the topic is, when people are losing, their go-to attack is, this guy's church is goofy. Scree! And this is coming from a grown man, a black belt in jiu-jitsu, gets so offended at jokes about the gi that he decides to go on this tirade against the Mormons. Yeah, wow. Pat yourself on the back, buddy. You must feel like a big man after that. But there's more to this. I'm going to read some other amazing facts. Here's a post I wrote a few years ago about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the gi. In the martial art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, practitioners of BJJ often tend to think that they are above the same level of judgment that we tend to meet out upon all the crappy self-defense schools out there, because Jiu-Jitsu isn't crappy self-defense, is it? If your answer for self-defense is martial arts of any kind, and you're arguing about which martial art is the best for winning a street fight, you might as well be arguing which shorts are the best for 5-degree weather. Because it doesn't work that way, friends. So I'm going to read this post from 2017 that I wrote. I just browsed over discussion number 2743 on how training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in a gi is important in case you get into a street fight with a guy who is wearing a jacket or similar to a gi, a suit coat, for example. Solid advice to deal with all those suit-wearing ruffians you're bound to meet at church or in a board meeting at the office. Seriously, though, street fights are dumb and completely avoidable the overwhelming majority of the time. If you've been in more than a couple, then you were probably the one starting the trouble in the first place. Stop it. In discussions of self-defense, not even in discussions of self-defense, in discussions about jokes about the gi. Because if you train jiu-jitsu for long enough, you're just going to start joking about it. There are entire meme pages dedicated to funny tropes that come up again and again in jiu-jitsu gyms, because we tend to see the same sort of thing happening over and over again. And when we see the same thing happening over and over again, we tend to make jokes and memes about it. But when that happens, people go on the defensive. Certain people. Most people don't, but certain people, including a litany of jiu-jitsu black belts who have their heads stuffed so far up their butts that they can't see reason, and they definitely don't understand humor. And they get sanctimonious and holier than thou, and these dudes need to chill out, man. But they will almost always retort with, in addition to the anti-Mormon arguments that come out of nowhere in a discussion about martial arts, other than that, they will come back with, well, the ghee is a good amalgam for a suit jacket. So when you're fighting on the street against a dude in a suit, you are prepared. And it's like, why are you having a street fight with your local congressman? That's weird, man. Why are you having a street fight with that nice businessman over there? That's weird. Why are you picking street fights with the Mormon missionaries who knock on your door dressed up in suits and ties? I don't get it. They're not your enemy, as much as you might like to think that they are, because the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has a way cooler backstory than yours. Let's be honest, it totally does. And no matter if you write the craziest parody of that origin story, it's a way cooler origin story than yours. I'm sticking to that. You want to fight about it? Prove me wrong. So, street fights. Let's talk about street fights for a minute. Street fights are dumb and completely avoidable the overwhelming majority of the time. People take issue with that statement a lot. But no, Ramsey, sometimes people will attack you and you can't help it. Does that happen the majority of the time? Like every day you go outside, you experience a violent, aggravated assault, and you couldn't help it? What kind of third world war zone do you live in, where you have access to Western social media and are being constantly violently assaulted and you can't help it? Either we are experiencing a failure to communicate, which I think is the situation here, and you simply don't understand what street fights are dumb and completely avoidable the overwhelming majority of the time actually means, and what you're hearing is victims of aggravated assault are causing their own problems, which is not what was said at all. My goodness. Read, folks. Learn how to read. A friend of the channel wrote this comment as a rebuttal. He said, street fights are dumb. Being completely avoidable is a bit of a reach. And notice he didn't actually quote exactly what was said. Street fights are dumb and completely avoidable the overwhelming majority of the time. And then he goes on to refute the partial statement. Street fights are completely avoidable. And I would argue, yeah, they are. Because I'm drawing a distinction between an aggravated assault and a street fight. A street fight is two idiots saying angry words, pushing, throwing haymakers, grabbing each other in a headlock and tumbling on the ground until their friends pull them apart. That's a street fight. An aggravated assault is somebody being attacked. And that's a different thing. An aggravated assault is a perpetrator and a victim. Not the same thing as a street fight. Fighting may occur, in an aggravated assault, not a street fight. Why do we even call them street fights? How many fights actually happen on a street? If this is how you know those idiots who say, I've been in 600 street fights, are lying through their teeth because they've never been hit by a car before. You fight in the street 600 times, one time, you're going to get hit by a car and you're probably going to die. You do that 600 times? You're not going to survive to see 600 times. So what's up with this idea of, I just think it's funny, the funny visual image that these people conjure up of fighting dudes in suits. You're going to fight Agent Smith from the Matrix? You're going to fight John Wick? You're going to fight your local pastor over at the church? Who are you planning on fighting? But back to my original point, that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners tend to think they are exempt from the ridicule that the self-defense industry rightfully gets for their power fantasy, because the self-defense industry is pure power fantasy. They are capitalizing on fear. They are fear-mongering. They are trying to sell you on this idea. You need to be afraid, because when you're afraid enough, you will buy my product or my service. Bunch of leeches and vampires, those idiots. Yeah, I said it, and I'm not taking it back. But then, some BJJ practitioners want to join that club for some reason and say, oh, me too. Look, that suit that dude is wearing on the street. More appropriately, on the sidewalk, perhaps on his way to work or lunch. It's kind of like a ghee. What if we get in a fight with that guy? You won't. When was the last time you got in a fight with a dude in a suit? There's some guy in the comments here who said he was a bouncer at a high-end club where the bouncers had to wear suits. And so he got in some kerfuffles wearing a suit. I don't know if he was bouncing against people who were also wearing suits. But I also don't think he was bow and arrow choking anybody. What do bouncers really do? They ask people to leave. If it comes to violence, it's push them out of the club. We're not talking about technical grip breaking. And I got another comment here. I'm just going to paraphrase it because it's long. This guy's like, well, I need to train in the gi because what if I'm wearing a hoodie and then the guy grabs me by the sleeve and then I need to break the grip, but I've never practiced my grip fighting. And it's like, okay, if you try to break grips and the same way you do in a gi and you're wearing a hoodie and the guy has, I don't know, a pistol grip on your hoodie. Because, of course, that's what the street toughs are going to do. They're going to grab you in a pistol grip on your hoodie. They're going to get a high collar grip on your hoodie. They're going to get collar sleeve control on your hoodie. And you try to break that grip, you're going to break your hoodie. You're going to tear that thing to shreds. That's what happens when you strip grips in regular clothes. You'll strip your clothes right off. Somebody grabs a t-shirt like this. It's an old t-shirt. I've had this shirt. You can see it's frayed. Got this in Singapore from Martial Combat before they rebranded as 1FC when I fought for them back in 2009, I think. That was a while back. Somebody grabbed a collar grip on this the same way you do with a gi, and I tried to strip that off. Goodbye shirt. You'd strip the grip, but it's not nearly as technical as anything you would do with the gi. So, all these apologetics to try to make jiu-jitsu applicable to street fighting, it is engaging in that silly power fantasy of wanting to belong to the street fight weirdos club. People get mad when I talk about this because it shines a light on the truth. You train martial arts because it's the pursuit of power. All of us, all martial arts. We want power. What we do with that power, if we are good enough to acquire any in the first place, is up to us. And that's a separate discussion. But we want power. The power to crush our enemies, or our imaginary enemies. People make fun of others if they have imaginary friends, right? Oh, that's something weird kids do. But grown men have imaginary enemies all the time. People in the comment section on social media have a lot of imaginary enemies, and if you don't believe it, just write a post with a joke about wearing a ghee. And one, you'll make some real enemies who will tell you all about their imaginary enemies. They have so many flippin' imaginary enemies. That's what self-defense classes are all about, fighting imaginary, invisible foes. These same people who made fun of me because I'm a man of faith who believes that there is a God in heaven, and they will retort against a joke about the ghee with a parody of my religion. Oh, you believe in an invisible man in the sky. Is that so much stranger than believing in all those imaginary enemies out on the imaginary streets of the neighborhood of make-believe? I used to say the neighborhood of make-believe is a nice place to visit, but you don't want to live there. But more and more, I'm starting to think it may not be a nice place to visit either, because there are a lot of imaginary street fights happening there every single moment of every single day. It's a rough neighborhood, that neighborhood of make-believe, guys. With all the imaginary enemies. Time to make friends with your imaginary enemies, guys. Put them to rest. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.